Are you brave enough to lose sight of your shore?
Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create.
I'm back. You're back. We're back. Yay! Did you miss me? I've missed you, my Creating Maven. But even while I was away, I was thinking about you and taking notes of all the things that I would say and share once I was able to get back in your ear. How in the world have you been? How has 2023 been so far? I'm sure it's had its bright spots and dark spots, just like mine has, just like any year does at any point, right? But especially by this point, right? But whatever has gone on, it's great to be back with you to continue this journey. And what a journey it has been. What a journey it is. And what a journey it's still gonna be. I'm so excited. So if this happens to be your first time tuning into Reframe to Create, tuning into the party, welcome. This means that you probably missed the fact that I've been gone for almost 4 whole months. And back in episode 52 in January, I shared that I was going on a hiatus for the quarter. And this sparked, this was sparked by a new year commitment for me that I shared in episode 51, which was to start from scratch for 2023. And I did this because I'd been feeling a little lost and rudderless towards the end of last year, and I needed to restart my engines. And this break was just what the doctor ordered. I got the reframe that I needed in order to get clarity on the ways and places and spaces that I want to create next. It's been phenomenal. I got into a whole bunch of stuff, including a trip to Morocco with longtime girlfriends, which I'll tell you all about later. And I learned some very important things, life-changing things for me, in fact, that I'm excited about and want to share with you. But how about you? How has this break been for you? What have you learned? What's your journey been like? What have you been doing? When I left off, I asked you to go back and listen to your favorite Reframe to Create episode for a refresher and an opportunity to put the tips into practice. So I want to know how that went. I want to hear all about what those things were. What were those important lessons? So, feel free to shoot me an email at joy@reframetocreate.com and tell me how it was. What have you learned? What have you been doing? And now that we're back, you're probably wondering, what's changed, what's going to be the same, or what's going to be different going forward. And I think I can explain this best by showing it through what I learned from one of the stories I heard in the early weeks of my hiatus from the podcast. In 2015, 4 women known as the Coxless Crew set out from Santa Barbara to be the first 4-person crew ever to row across the Pacific Ocean, unsupported. And they were doing this to raise money for breast cancer charities. They called themselves the Coxless Crew because they didn't have what's called a coxswain, which is the name of the person you see on rowing boats who is not rowing but is in charge of navigation and steering. And they trained for 4 years before they traveled 8,446 miles in 9 months from San Francisco to Honolulu to Samoa and then to Australia, all unsupported. And that means they didn't have any trailing boats going on the journey with them to help them if they got into trouble. They were out on that big, wide, scary Pacific Ocean all on their own through wind, rain, storms, and scorching heat. They rowed 2 at a time in 2-hour shifts for 24 hours. 2 hours on, switch, 2 hours off. Switch, 2 hours on, switch, 2 hours off. Switch. This is how they just kept going, like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just on and on, week after week. And they were the first people to ever successfully do this. They did this. They rowed from America to Australia. Like, wild, right? And you can watch these women's experience unfold in the documentary Losing Sight of Shore, which is what inspired the title for this episode. And as I was watching these women paddle along and battle the mental exhaustion and psychological stress of the journey that they were on, I couldn't help but draw lessons and parallels to my own journey, and perhaps you can draw some to yours as well. And the lessons were these, and like the first lesson is this, and it's a phrase one of the ladies said, and what ended up being the title of the documentary. She said, "You can never cross the ocean until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore." Yeah. Let that sink in. You can never cross the ocean until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. That sense, that feeling that you want something different, that there's something calling you, but you don't know what it is, or maybe you do, but it's so far away across a big ocean that it's intimidating to think of making the journey there. Because the shore that you're on, even though it's rocky, even though those rocks are cutting your feet and making them bleed, even though it's a blah shore that's drowning your heart in a sense of meaninglessness, it's your shore. It's the devil you know. It's familiar, even if it's a unique pain. But still something calls. You know this sense, and you know it deeply. This sense that maybe despite all the fears and the reasons why you might want to stay here and be safe, you know you're about to leave it all and cross a big ocean. But what does it take? What does it take to cross this ocean? Well, as the phrase says, it takes courage. Not just any courage, though. It takes the courage that arises when you're slowly watching the familiar shore fade, fade, fade further away as you become surrounded by the big, big ocean, and still you press on. It takes courage to lose sight of the shore. The women of that crew were not going to get to Australia by hugging the U.S. coastline, so they didn't. They lost sight of their shore. And this is what we've done throughout our lives, you and I, right? Like if you learn to swim, you've had to, lunge from the safety of the side of a pool. There's no other way to learn to swim. You have to lose sight of that shore in a sense. And this is what it was like for me when I left work in the nonprofit world years ago by quitting my job without an alternative. I completely lost sight of my shore. This is possibly the moment for you that you're in right now. And what is that? What is that for you? What's your shore right now? What is it time to lose sight of to cross your ocean? But you might have some questions to my questions, right? You might be thinking, why would I do this? Why would you do this? Why would anyone do this? Why would anyone leave safety and go out on some journey across the ocean? And family members and friends of this women's crew asked them the same thing. And one of the mothers had a great answer. She said, "Life is there to live and not just to exist." And that's the answer to that question of why you would leave a shore, why you would leave safety, to live life. It's the second lesson. Life is there to live and not just to exist. And this is what we're doing sometimes when we're in safety and hugging the shore. We're just existing. Sometimes you're just existing. Maybe like me, sometimes you're afraid of the unknown, so you just float along in whatever there is right now. And that's what I was starting to feel was happening to me when I needed to put a stop to things and take this break from this podcast, and in many ways take a break from the life that I created, right? Sometimes you need a break to shake things up, to shake you out of just existing so you can step back and really see and give yourself the chance to start living again. So I want you to ask yourself this question. Are you living or are you just existing? And what do you want right now? The third lesson from the documentary was another shared nugget from one of the ladies, Natalia specifically. And she said, "I believe that everyone has their own Pacific to cross." This idea that not only do we have to be willing to lose sight of the shore to cross the ocean, but that we all are going to be faced with this decision at some point in our life is kind of a relief. It's a relief because it shows that we're not doing something wrong when we get to this inflection point. When I felt that feeling come over me again at the start of the year, I kind of moaned to myself. I groaned inwardly and I was like, joy, not again. This feels like joy circa 2014. That year was a year that I felt like everything in my life felt and tasted like sandpaper, and I just had to get out, right? I had to do something different. And for years after that, as I worked to build a new life, around a new career, and eventually did, I felt like I've finally done it. I've arrived. I've curated things just so that I won't have to do this type of journey again. So imagine my absolute horror towards the end of last year and into this year when I felt the call of the ocean again. And sometimes these journeys are responsibilities that we can't escape. If we listen to the quote, it's like we all have an ocean to cross and we all have our own Pacific. Maybe we'll face it many times in our lives. And knowing and accepting this can help us, to just kind of settle into it. We can have a more powerful experience if we accept this and come to realize it's actually a normal part and aspect of life. There's nothing wrong with us. We're not, reckless or unstable, which is what I was sometimes feeling about myself, because I really do go through these cycles of wanting to reinvent myself or things and aspects of my life. Every few years, it cycles back again. And I feel bad about it because I feel like, you're like this airy fairy butterfly, flittering about, you can't build or stick with anything solid. But this is just me. It's my gift. And I've seen how this gift is something that I'm able to give to others, especially when I'm brave enough to take them along my journey and share the wonderful lessons that come out of it. Kind of like I'm doing now as I bring you along and then as I continue to do through this podcast. So what about you? What ocean do you have to cross? What's your own Pacific, in a sense? And are you hearing the call to do so, or are you ignoring it? The fourth lesson I got from the story of these women was this. It's mostly all journey and very little destination. The ladies of this crew made a couple of stops on their Pacific Ocean crossing journey, and they did it to re-up on supplies, but most of it was journey. Most of it was rowing minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, again and again and again. Even the ending moment when they finally made it to Australia and stepped off the boat together to meet their cheering family and friends, even that moment was such a tiny, tiny, tiny part, at least time-wise, when taken against the backdrop of their entire experience. It was mostly journey. And that's what our lives are. And most of the things we think we're passing through and trying to get to the other side of, most of life is journey. And that journey can be a slog. And it's in that slog, it's in the doldrums that you find out what you're really made of. It's there you find out what's really important to you. And folks, the doldrums are a legit, real mind-numbing thing. I watched these ladies row for weeks in the doldrums, like the real doldrums, which is the nickname given by sailors to an area in the ocean whose official name is the Intertropical Convergence Zone. And it's the part of the ocean where the northeast and southeast trade winds converge. It encircles Earth near the thermal equator. And in this area, there is oftentimes very erratic weather, but a lot of times just completely windless weather. You hear that? No wind. And when you're rowing, you need wind to help move you along. And without the wind, these ladies were just rowing, and not making progress for days. And man, it was mind-numbing and absolutely heartbreaking to watch. That place can sap your will to live. Does your journey feel like the doldrums right now? Maybe you're deep in a monotony. Maybe that monotony has made you come to hate something you once loved. That's what I watched happen to Emma, one of the women. And at the start of the documentary, in the 4 years of their training for the journey, she was all about rowing, right? She was the steady Eddie of the group. She was focused and she had such a deep love for rowing. And to me, she was the most solid person and likely to be the one to help them emotionally get through the darkest days. And for a long time, she was. But in the doldrums, I saw something happen to her. And even beyond that point, something happened to her. She slowly lost herself as she lost her will to row, and she went into this very, very deep depression. It was made worse by the fact that, she started hating rowing, but she had to keep doing it because she had to. 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, week after week after week after week. And it was like watching someone's skin get peeled off. It was so painful. It was like she was being ripped apart from herself. And I guess I felt it deeply because I felt like I was going through something similar in my own life. Before becoming a coach and for years in my nonprofit work, I had this burning desire to be an expert in something. I wanted to have my own thing, my own area of expertise. And through years of hard work and certifications and boldly launching deeper into the work of executive leadership coaching and now storytelling coaching, I felt like, yes, finally, I've arrived, I've done it. I've achieved that mastery, that thing I love professionally that I'm never going to move from, but only go deeper and deeper with. I'm going to be known for this and only this, and I'm, finally going to park my car here, no more wandering around aimlessly on this ocean. And then things started to happen that felt like my own doldrums. And I've had to find a way to, not fall out of love with what I love just because of the slog of the doldrums. And it's not easy. And sometimes you don't win that fight. Emma didn't win that fight. And after their journey ended, she moved on from rowing. She completely lost her love for it and she moved on to other things. But even that knowledge is liberating for me. It showed me that there can be something on the other side of the thing that you can't imagine living without. There can be something on the other side of the current version of yourself that you're holding on to so tightly and can't imagine a different version of or loving different things. There is something on the other side. But we have to make peace with the journey, with the monotony, with the grind, with the day-to-day. We have to come to love it or we'll die out on the ocean in the midst of the journey. But even if we do, there's something on the other side. So, how are you doing in your own doldrums right now? Have you found a way to fall in love with the monotony so that you don't lose what you really love in the mind-numbing, pounding trudge of it all? So these are the 4 lessons that have really gotten into my soul and that are informing what the journey looks like for me next on Reframe to Create. 1, the need for courage to lose sight of the shore, the need to lose sight of what is safe, comfortable, and familiar in order to get on the journey of crossing the ocean. 2, the understanding that the reason for this journey is for nothing short of life itself. Shore hugging at all costs is merely existing, and that won't do. We gotta live. 3, ocean crossing is a responsibility of life that may come around many times, and it doesn't make us unstable or silly because we're faced with this choice again. And 4, as exciting as the idea of crossing an ocean is, we gotta remember and love that we're mostly crossing the ocean and spending very little time actually getting to the other shore. You gotta be ready and okay with this if you're going to make it without losing your whole mind before you get there. For me, everything has gotten really quiet in my head. So much that used to matter doesn't matter anymore, and not in a cynical, upturned lip, type of way, not in a way that has a tinge of bitterness to it and that really means the opposite. No, like really in a freedom like you would never know you needed it type of way. So what now? Well, I'm back for the journey. I didn't wait until I got to the other side of the ocean and made landfall to come back to you, to come back to this podcast. I'm still rowing across my own Pacific. And like the women, I'm documenting the lessons along the way. I don't have any grand, wise conclusions to tell you about. I'm not even feeling the pressure to have that at all. In recent years, my shore has been the certainty I felt about what I'm doing when it comes to executive leadership coaching, storytelling coaching, and even this Reframe to Create podcast. But I feel the call again, and I'm launching out again for, as of now, yet unknown new shore. I still believe in creating experiences, projects, products, or services, whatever you're gifted to create. And that's what I'm going to continue to inspire and encourage you to do. But what I've come to realize through this experience is that there might be seasons to your creating. You might not always need to be creating the same type of thing in all seasons of your life. And that's the shift that I'm personally experiencing. While on this break, I had a lot of ups and downs, but the thing that stood out to me was just how important and stabilizing, life-giving, and life-affirming my relationships are. They are the things that matter most to me. In the end, even more than what I create. What I create matters because of what it means to my relationships with loved ones and strangers alike, those I will relate with closely and those who I will never meet. To honor that love for relationships, I recently went on a trip to Morocco with longtime girlfriends from middle school, and while we were there, we had a blast, including camel rides and a hot air balloon ride. I totally recommend Morocco if you've never been. And that hot air balloon ride was one of the most peaceful experiences I've had. Now, I know I've mentioned my fear of flying before and how I'm always gripping the airline armrest when we hit turbulence. So you're probably thinking, okay, wouldn't you think twice about getting in a hot air balloon? And I did. Honestly, I did at first, especially when I saw them floating up in the air and I was like, oh, that's kind of pretty high. But once that bad boy was blown up and they called us and they're like, okay, your turn. I don't know what it was. Something came over me and I was off and almost half trotting and running. And I was the first one in my girlfriend crew to climb into the basket. I was just ready. And we lifted up into the air and we floated along just so gently for about 30 minutes. And we finally came down pretty gently and I just took it all in. It was glorious being in the sky with my friends, with strangers, and with dozens of other hot air balloons all, along the Moroccan skyline as dawn was breaking. It's so wonderful to feel that lightness deep in your bones, that feeling, when you're up there, that there's nothing to prove, nothing to achieve, and everything to simply savor and enjoy. So when we floated back down, it was clear to me that this is what I want more of. Not necessarily hot air balloon rides, but the feeling that came from it. For me right now, creating is about experiences. It's about me creating personal experiences with the people who matter most. That looks like taking trips, going to see friends who are going through tough times, catching up with folks who I haven't talked to for a long time, having long conversations with my mom. This is what I'm creating right now. Life experiences that are filling up my memory bank of loving moments. This is where I am right now. This is the creating season that I'm in. And it makes me think back to episode 10, where I shared how your work is not the center. That idea about keeping the main things the main things. It's about never losing sight of life and living, even while you work, even while you create, especially while you do those things, because those things are often so tied to our sense of achievement and not our sense of being and self. And we can get so sucked into that we make living, we make things like faith, family, friends, food, and fun an afterthought. We make them things that are relegated to only vacation time, retirement time, the later times of life. But that's not going to work for me anymore. That's a shore that I'm willing and have the courage to lose sight of. My intense focus is not on creating a career. Honestly, I don't really care about that right now. It's not even about creating on the job or creating for my business. It's all about my relationships right now for me. Faith, family, and friends. My relationship with God and my relationship with the people He's put in my life to relate with, love, and serve and grow with. I'm not even questioning why this is my season right now. Creating personal experiences. I'm just living into it. I'm appreciating my people and my relationships deeply. And I encourage you to embrace the idea that we all have seasons, and you may be transitioning from one right now, and that's totally fine. Maybe you're transitioning from one type of creating form to another. Maybe you were creating products for a bit of time and now you're transitioning to services, or maybe you were creating services and now you're going to move on to different types of experiences or projects, whatever it is. Or you may be transitioning from creating to just having a period of rest for a bit, like I did. Whatever it is, it's all good, and I'm all here for it. And I hope we can just walk on this journey together as we learn and grow through it all here at Reframe to Create. And the journey does continue. It is going to continue. I'm back to share more about all the ways you can create in your life. I'll continue to help you see how you can create products, services, experiences, and projects through solo episodes and the wisdom that our guests will share. We're still on it, folks. We're also going to keep going into not just what we're doing and creating, but how we're doing it. How are we moving through our creating and life in a way that keeps living at the center? And if you're also feeling the call to leave your shore, I hope the women who crossed the Pacific and my journey has inspired you to launch out. Your shore is anything and everything that's familiar to you. It's the things that have become your security blanket because they're familiar, the things that are holding you back and keeping you from listening to a call of your ocean. And I hope you'll have the courage to join me out on this Pacific as we row, row, row. Coming up in episode 54, I have a very special guest. Carol Cox from Speaking Your Brand stops by to drop some great nuggets of wisdom about how to be better at navigating transitions and pivoting in the midst of unplanned change. You don't want to miss this, so stay tuned. See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to always ask yourself, what will I create?